Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now, let's start. The North Sea roared beneath a storm-blackened sky, waves crashing against the listing Saxon ship like Thor's hammer upon an anvil. Princess Thora Vorsson clung to splintered wood, the sea's icy fingers tearing at her sodden gown. The ornate brooch that marked her royal lineage, the last gift from her father, King Vorsson of Northumbria, remained pinned at her throat, though she had hastily covered it with a torn piece of cloth before the final wave claimed their vessel. "Hold fast!" The captain's final words echoed in her ears as the tempest swallowed him and most of her royal guard. Now only the endless grey waters stretched before her, mocking her prayers to the Christian God who seemed to have abandoned her to the pagan sea. 3 days earlier, she had departed her father's hall with diplomatic scrolls bound for her cousin's court. A marriage alliance was being negotiated, one that would strengthen Northumbria against the heathen Northmen whose dragon-prowed ships had terrorized their coasts for generations. The same Northmen who had slaughtered her mother and brother 7 summers past. The bitter irony was not lost on Thora as her consciousness began to fade. To survive Saxon betrayal, only to perish in the same waters that carried her most hated enemies to England's shores. As darkness claimed her, she did not see the carved wooden beast cutting through the waves toward her floating form, a wolf's head mounted on the prow of a sleek longship. She did not hear the shouts of men speaking in the harsh tongue of the north. "Man overboard," called a voice in Norse. "There, in the wreckage." Strong arms plucked her from the sea's grasp. Rough hands laid her upon wooden planks. Through salt-stung eyes, she glimpsed bearded faces, long hair bound in braids, and the glint of arm rings that marked these men as warriors, Viking raiders. "She lives," said one, pressing fingers to her throat. "A Saxon woman, by her dress," observed another. "The sea has delivered us a thrall," laughed a third. "Ran gives gifts to the bold." A deeper voice cut through their chatter. "Enough. Cover her and bring her below. We return to Ravholm with our plunder. The gods will decide her fate." Consciousness slipped from Thora like water through cupped hands. Hakon Arnorsson stood at the prow of his longship, the taste of victory sweet on his tongue. The raid on the small Saxon settlement had yielded silver, grain, and textiles, enough to please his men and strengthen his position among the Jarls of Ravholm. At 30 winters, he had commanded raids for 12 years, earning respect through both his skill with an axe and his sharp mind. Unlike many of his fellow warriors, he preferred strategy to slaughter, targeted wealth to wanton destruction. His younger brother Eirik approached, gesturing toward the stern where the unconscious woman lay bundled in furs. "The Saxon woman still lives. Sigrid has tended to her." Hakon nodded. "Good. When she wakes, find out who she is. Perhaps she can be ransomed. And if not..." Eirik's eyes gleamed with suggestion. "Then she works like any thrall," Hakon said firmly. "But she is not to be harmed. The gods delivered her to us, it would be unwise to mistreat their gift." Eirik frowned but nodded. At 25 winters, he was eager to prove himself, sometimes too eager. Where Hakon was measured, Eirik burned hot as forge fire. Both had their father's height and their mother's blue eyes, but while Hakon wore his responsibilities like well-fitted armor, Eirik chafed under them. "Land ahead," called the lookout. The distant shoreline of Ravholm emerged from the mist, their settlement nestled in a protected fjord on the Norwegian coast. Stone and timber houses clustered around a great hall, smoke from cooking fires rising like prayers to Odin's realm. As they drew closer, Hakon's thoughts turned to the woman they had pulled from the sea. There was something about her, something in the way she had fought for breath even when half drowned, that spoke of unusual strength. He had seen many thralls in his time, but few with such determination to live. He would soon discover just how dangerous that determination could be. Thora woke to the crackle of fire and the low murmur of unfamiliar voices. Her body ached as though she had been trampled by horses, her throat raw from swallowed seawater. For a moment, she believed herself in her father's hall, recovering from some illness, then memory crashed upon her like waves on rocks. The shipwreck. The cold embrace of the sea. And then, she sat bolt upright, immediately regretting the movement as pain lanced through her head. A small wooden dwelling came into focus around her. She lay on a straw-filled pallet covered with furs, a fire burning in a central hearth. Across the room, a woman with graying blonde hair bound in braids worked at a loom, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The woman turned, noting Thora's consciousness with keen eyes. "You're awake. Good. I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever rejoin the living." She spoke in Norse, but Thora understood. Her mother had insisted she learn the language of their enemies, knowing it might someday save her life. Thora's hand flew to her throat. Relief flooded her when she felt her brooch still there, hidden beneath the rough woolen tunic someone had dressed her in. "Where am I?" she asked in careful Norse, her accent deliberately thickened to disguise her fluency. "Who are you?" Surprise flickered across the older woman's face. "You speak our tongue. Interesting." She set aside her weaving and approached. "I am Sigrid, healer of Ravholm and aunt to Hakon Arnorsson, who pulled you from the sea. You are in my home, which sits in the heart of our settlement. Ravholm. A Viking settlement." Panic threatened to overwhelm Thora, but years of court training helped her maintain composure. If they knew who she was, the daughter of the Saxon king who had executed captured Viking raiders, her life would be measured in heartbeats. "I am Tara," she lied, choosing a common Saxon name. "A merchant's daughter. Our ship was bound for Francia when the storm took us." Sigrid's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she caught the hesitation. "Well, Tara of the merchant family, the sea brought you to us, and now you belong to Hakon's household. Once you've regained your strength, you'll work as a thrall until your worth is repaid. A slave." She, Princess Thora, daughter of King Vorsson, reduced to servitude among her blood enemies. The irony might have made her laugh if the situation weren't so dire. "When will I meet this Hakon?" she asked, testing the foreign name on her tongue. "Soon enough. He returns from the Thing assembly tonight. Until then, rest." Sigrid handed her a wooden cup filled with some herbal brew. "Drink. It will help with the pain." Thora accepted the cup cautiously, sniffing its contents before taking a small sip. It tasted of honey and herbs, not poison. As the warmth spread through her limbs, she assessed her situation with the tactical mind her father had cultivated in her. She was alone in enemy territory, presumed dead by her people. No rescue would come. If she revealed her identity, death would be certain. If she attempted escape now, weakened and unfamiliar with her surroundings, failure was likely. Her only option was to play the role of humble thrall until an opportunity presented itself. What she didn't anticipate was how difficult maintaining that role would become once she met the man who had pulled her from the sea. The great hall of Ravholm buzzed with voices and laughter as warriors and villagers gathered to hear the outcome of the Thing, the assembly where disputes were settled and laws upheld. Hakon sat at the high table, his brother Eirik to his right, other respected warriors flanking them. Serving thralls moved between tables, filling horns with mead and placing platters of roasted meat before hungry men. "The matter is settled then," announced Thorvald, the grey-bearded law speaker. "The disputed fishing grounds will be shared between the two families, with equal access during the spring season." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Hakon nodded, satisfied. He had helped broker this compromise, preventing a blood feud that would have weakened their community. His father had taught him that a leader's strength lay not just in his sword arm but in his ability to forge peace among his people. His attention was drawn to movement at the hall's entrance. Sigrid entered, and behind her walked the woman they had rescued from the sea. She stood taller than Hakon expected, her movements graceful despite obvious exhaustion. Her dark auburn hair had been tamed into a simple braid, her face scrubbed clean of salt. She wore a borrowed dress of undyed wool, belted at the waist. Even in such plain garments, something about her bearing commanded attention. Whispers followed her progress through the hall. A new face, especially a female one, always sparked interest in their isolated community. Hakon observed the way she carried herself, noting the straight spine and level gaze that seemed at odds with her claimed merchant's daughter status. Sigrid guided her to stand before the high table. "Nephew, the sea gift has awakened." Hakon studied the woman's face. High cheekbones, a straight nose, and eyes the color of summer leaves met his gaze without flinching. Most thralls kept their eyes lowered in the presence of free men, yet this woman looked directly at him, assessing him as thoroughly as he assessed her. "You're fortunate the gods guided our ship to you, Thora of Saxon lands," he said, watching for her reaction. "Few survive the sea's hunger." "I thank you for my life," she replied in Norse, her accent thick but understandable. "Though I wonder if I've merely exchanged one death for another." A hush fell over the nearest tables. Such boldness from a thrall was unexpected. Eric's hand tightened around his drinking horn, his expression darkening at the perceived disrespect. To everyone's surprise, Hakon laughed. "The sea did not drown your spirit, it seems." He rose from his seat, circling the table to stand before her. Up close, he towered over her, though she did not cower. "In Ravholm, we value strength. Work hard, prove your worth, and you'll find no unnecessary cruelty here. Defy our ways." He left the threat unspoken. "I understand," she said, something flashing in her eyes that might have been anger or fear. "Good. You'll serve in my household. Sigrid will show you your duties." He gestured to his aunt, then addressed the hall. "Tonight we celebrate a successful raid and a favorable ruling at the Thing. Let the skald sing of our deeds." As conversation resumed around them, Hakon leaned closer to the Saxon woman. "You have fire in you, Thora. Take care it doesn't burn you in a land of ice." She met his gaze steadily. "Fire melts ice, warrior. Perhaps you should be the cautious one." For the first time in many raids, Hakon Arnorsson felt as though he might have brought home something more dangerous than he anticipated. Weeks passed with painful slowness for Thora. Each day brought new challenges as she adapted to the life of a thrall in Hakon's household. She learned to grind grain, prepare meals, clean furs, and assist with weaving, tasks she had only ever observed servants performing in her father's court. Her hands, once soft and unmarked, grew calloused. Her back ached from hours of labor. Yet she observed and listened, gathering information that might aid her escape. The settlement's routines, the placement of guards, the coming and going of ships, she committed each detail to memory while carefully maintaining her disguise. What she hadn't counted on was Hakon's persistent attention. Unlike his brother Eric, who watched her with barely concealed contempt and suspicion, Hakon seemed genuinely curious about her. He would question her about Saxon customs while she served his evening meal, or pause to observe her work, offering unexpected praise when she mastered a new skill. "You learn quickly for one raised in merchant comfort," he remarked one evening as she poured mead into his horn. "Survival requires adaptation," she replied, careful to maintain her thickened accent. His eyes, blue as winter sky, studied her face. "Indeed. Though I wonder what you're truly adapting to, life as a thrall, or life among those you've been taught to hate." Her hand trembled slightly, spilling a drop of mead. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" "The way you flinch when warriors speak of raids on Saxon shores. The prayers you whisper at night, Christian prayers, though you try to hide them." He leaned forward. "I'm not a fool, Thora. You hide more than your true feelings about your captivity." Thora's heart hammered against her ribs. "We all have secrets, Jarl Hakon. Even you." A smile tugged at his beard-framed lips. "True enough. But know this, I am watching you, Saxon woman. Closely." The threat lingered between them, and yet something in his tone suggested more than simple suspicion. There was interest there, perhaps even admiration. It unsettled her more than outright hostility would have. That night, as she lay on her pallet in the small room assigned to her near the kitchen, Thora struggled with conflicting emotions. These people were her enemies. Their kind had killed her mother and brother. Their raids had terrorized her homeland for generations. She should hate them all, especially their leader. Yet in the weeks of her captivity, she had seen another side to these barbarians. They cared deeply for their children, honored their elders, and valued wisdom alongside strength. Women held property, spoke freely in the Thing, and could divorce husbands who mistreated them, right Saxon women could scarcely imagine. And Hakon, he was unlike any man she had encountered, Saxon or otherwise. Where other warriors boasted of slaughter, he spoke of strategy. Where they demanded, he requested. The settlement prospered under his leadership not through fear but respect. "This changes nothing," she whispered to herself, clutching the hidden brooch beneath her sleeping tunic. "I am still Thora Vorsson, Princess of Northumbria. And I will return home." But as sleep claimed her, her dreams betrayed her. In them, she stood not in her father's hall, but at the prow of a longship, the wind in her hair and Hakon at her side. Spring yielded to summer, and with the warmer weather came preparations for another raid. Hakon's longship would soon sail for Saxon shores, accompanied by 2 other vessels. The irony that they might attack her father's lands was not lost on Thora. As the departure grew closer, she finalized her escape plan. With most warriors gone, the settlement would be less guarded. She had secretly gathered supplies, a knife stolen from the kitchen, dried food, a water skin, and a small boat she had discovered hidden in a cove not far from the settlement. When the raiders departed, she would make her move. What she hadn't expected was Hakon's summons the evening before the planned raid. She found him in his private chambers, bent over maps spread across a wooden table. Unlike the great hall with its communal hearth and shared benches, this room reflected Hakon himself, ordered, practical, yet containing unexpected touches of refinement. Foreign fabric softened wooden benches, carved chess pieces stood frozen in battle on a side table, and books, actual written volumes, occupied a shelf along one wall. He looked up as she entered, gesturing for her to close the door. "Tara. Thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. A smile flickered across his face. "We always have choices. Some are merely less pleasant than others." He straightened, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "You've changed since you arrived. Hardship changes people. As does purpose." He crossed the room, stopping within arm's reach. "You move differently now. Your hands are stronger, your gaze more direct. The sea gift has become a shield maiden in spirit, if not in practice." Thora felt her cheeks warm at his scrutiny. "What do you want of me, Hakon?" "The truth," he said simply. Her heart stuttered. "I've told you lies." He circled her slowly. "Clever lies, well maintained, but lies nonetheless. No merchant's daughter carries herself like a queen. No common Saxon speaks Norse with the precision you do when you forget to maintain your false accent. And no thrall observes and catalogues her surroundings with such tactical awareness." Fear clawed at her throat. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." He stopped before her. "Who are you really, woman who calls herself Tara? A noble woman? A spy?" His voice lowered. "Or something more dangerous?" The moment stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Thora weighed her options. Denial seemed pointless now. Perhaps a partial truth would satisfy him. "I am of noble birth," she admitted. "My father is a thegn in Northumbria. I was being sent to relatives when our ship was caught in the storm." Hakon's expression revealed nothing. "And why hide this? We would have ransomed you." "Would you?" "After my father executed Viking captives at York 3 summers past." The words escaped before she could consider them, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Ah. Not just any thegn, then." His hand moved to the hilt of his knife, though he did not draw it. "Who are you truly? Your complete name and lineage." "Now." Thora lifted her chin. If death came, she would meet it with dignity. "I am Thora Vorsson, daughter of King Vorsson of Northumbria." For a long moment, Hakon stood motionless, his expression unreadable. Then, to her astonishment, he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and something like admiration. "By the gods, we pulled a princess from the sea." He shook his head. "No wonder you've been planning escape since the moment you arrived. You knew." I suspected you planned something. The missing knife, the supplies gathered bit by bit. He moved to pour 2 cups of mead, offering one to her. What I didn't know was that I harbored royal prey beneath my roof. She accepted the cup cautiously. And now that you know. Now I have a difficult choice. He sipped his mead, eyes never leaving hers. Your father is our enemy. His raids against our settlements are as fierce as ours against his shores. Your worth as a hostage is considerable. Then why not parade me before your men? Announce your great prize. She challenged. Because some would demand your immediate execution in revenge for their kin slain by your father. His voice hardened. Because Eric lost his wife to Saxon raiders last year and has sworn blood vengeance against your people. Because once your identity is known, I cannot protect you. Thora blinked, surprised by his implied desire to keep her safe. Why would you want to protect me? Hakon set down his cup, moving closer until she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. Perhaps I see something in you worth preserving. Courage. Intelligence. Honor. His voice dropped lower. Beauty. Heat rushed to her face that had nothing to do with fear. I am your enemy. Are you? His hand rose, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. Or are you, like me, a person caught between worlds, trying to navigate blood feuds you did not start? The touch sent an unexpected shock through her body. For weeks, she had fought against any feeling beyond calculated observation of this man. Now, with his fingers having traced the curve of her cheek, she found her defenses crumbling. What happens now? She whispered. Tomorrow I sail with my men. You will remain here, continuing your disguise as Thora the thrall. His eyes held hers. When I return, we will decide your fate. Until then, I ask for your word that you will not attempt escape. Why would I give such a promise? Because I am offering you my protection in return. And because I think, despite everything, there is trust growing between us. Thora struggled with herself. Her planned escape lay within reach, yet something in Hakon's words, in his touch, made her hesitate. And if I refuse? Then I will have no choice but to reveal your identity before I leave. Your fate would be in the hands of those who remain. His expression softened. I don't wish that for you, Thora Vorsson. The sound of her true name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. Against all reason, against her very purpose, she found herself nodding. You have my word. I will remain until you return. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. He stepped back, creating distance between them. Now go. Dawn comes early, and there is much to prepare. As she turned to leave, he called after her. Thora. She paused at the door. Be careful. Eric watches you closely. Trust no one while I am gone. She nodded once before slipping away, her mind awhirl with questions. Chief among them, why did the thought of Hakon sailing into danger suddenly frighten her more than her own precarious situation? The raiders departed with the morning tide, their longships cutting through the fjord's waters like wolves through forest shadows. Thora watched from the bluffs above the settlement, one hand pressed against the brooch hidden beneath her tunic. 3 ships, laden with warriors eager for glory and plunder, sailing toward her homeland. She should feel only hatred watching them depart. Instead, her emotions tangled like fishing nets in a storm. Concern for her people warred with fear for one particular Viking. The contradiction made her head ache. Enjoying the view, Saxon? She turned to find Eric watching her, his expression cold. Where Hakon's eyes held summer skies, his brother's contained winter's ice. I was bid to gather herbs from the hillside, she lied, gesturing to the small basket she carried as part of her ruse. And yet you linger, watching our ships. He stepped closer, his hand resting on the axe at his belt. One might wonder where your loyalties lie. I am a thrall. My loyalty is compelled, not given. His laugh held no warmth. My brother may be fooled by your obedient act, but I see through you. There is defiance in your eyes, and something else. His gaze narrowed. Knowledge. Secrets. Thora forced herself to look away, feigning submission. I know nothing of value, warrior. I am simply trying to survive. We shall see. He circled her like a predator. While my brother is gone, you answer to me. I will be watching you, Thora. One misstep, one whisper of conspiracy, and you'll wish the sea had claimed you. With that threat hanging between them, he stalked away, leaving Thora shaken. Hakon's warning echoed in her mind. Eirik suspected something, perhaps not her true identity, but certainly that she was more than she claimed. The weeks that followed tested her resolve and cunning. True to his word, Eirik set her the most grueling tasks, watching for any sign of weakness or rebellion. She hauled water, scrubbed floors until her knees bled, and mended fishing nets until her fingers were raw. Yet each night, exhausted though she was, Thora found herself standing at the shore, scanning the horizon for returning sails. Praying to a god she wasn't sure listened anymore that Hakon would return safely, and wondering when his safety had become so important to her. It was Sigrid who finally confronted her, finding her at the shoreline one evening as the summer sun lingered on the horizon. He's been gone nearly a month, the older woman said, coming to stand beside her. Staring at the sea won't bring him back any sooner. Thora started. I don't know what you mean. Sigrid's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. Girl, I've lived too many winters to be fooled by such denial. I see how you watch for his ship. I hear how you speak his name in your sleep. Heat rushed to Thora's cheeks. You're mistaken. Am I? Sigrid sat on a nearby rock, patting the space beside her. When Thora reluctantly joined her, she continued. My nephew is a good man, better than most. He leads through wisdom rather than fear, sees beyond the edge of his own sword. But he carries burdens few understand. Despite herself, Thora found herself asking, what burdens? His father was a great jarl, respected throughout these lands. When he died 3 winters ago, many thought Eirik should lead. He is fierce, traditional, everything our people expect in a war chief. But their father chose Hakon, seeing in him the vision needed for our people to do more than simply raid and survive. Sigrid gazed out over the water. Hakon believes our future lies not just in plunder, but in settlement, trade, building lasting alliances, even with former enemies. This makes him controversial among the old guard. And you tell me this why? Because I see the way he looks at you, Saxon girl. And I see danger in it. Sigrid's tone grew grave. There are those who already question his leadership. If they knew he harbored feelings for a thrall, a Saxon thrall, it would give his enemies the weapon they seek against him. Thora's throat tightened. There is nothing between us. Not yet, Sigrid agreed. But seeds planted often grow, whether we will it or not. She fixed Thora with a penetrating gaze. Whatever you're hiding, and yes, I know you hide something, consider carefully how it might harm him. Before Thora could respond, a shout came from the settlement. They turned to see a young boy running toward them, pointing excitedly out to sea. Ships, he cried. 3 ships returning. Thora's heart leapt in her chest as she strained to see the approaching vessels. Longships crested the waves, their sails billowing in the evening breeze. Relief flooded her, followed immediately by confusion at her own reaction. She should not care so deeply for the return of her captors, yet here she stood, fingers pressed to her lips, tears threatening. Sigrid watched her with knowing eyes. Be careful, girl. The heart rarely listens to reason, but in this case, it should. As the settlement erupted in preparation for the raiders' return, Thora remained rooted to the spot, Sigrid's warning echoing in her mind. The healer was right, whatever this feeling was that bloomed in her chest at the sight of those returning ships, it could only lead to pain. For even if Hakon shared it, how could anything grow between the daughter of a Saxon king and the Viking who raided her shores? Their worlds stood opposed as firmly as land and sea. Yet as the ships drew closer and she made out Hakon's tall figure standing at the prow of the lead vessel, Thora knew with sinking certainty that her heart had already chosen its path, regardless of what her mind might counsel. The celebration in the great hall lasted well into the night. The raid had been successful. Silver, amber, textiles, and other valuable goods now filled Ravholm's storehouses. Warriors boasted of their deeds while village women listened with admiring smiles. Children darted between tables, snatching treats and absorbing tales of adventure that would shape their understanding of the world. Thora moved among them, serving mead and avoiding Eric's cold stare. Hakon sat in the high seat, accepting congratulations from his people, yet his eyes frequently sought her out as she performed her duties. When their gazes met, something unspoken passed between them: relief, recognition, anticipation. It was near midnight when he finally approached her, catching her alone as she refilled a pitcher from the barrel of mead. "Walk with me," he said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. "The moon is full, and there are matters we must discuss." Though exhausted from the day's labors, Thora nodded. They slipped from the hall separately, Thora exiting first while conversation and song covered her departure. Outside, the summer night enfolded them in gentle darkness, the moon casting silver light across the settlement. Hakon led her away from the revelry, along a path that wound up the hillside to a promontory overlooking the fjord. Below them, Ravholm's hearth fires glowed like earthbound stars. Above, the sky spread vast and star-flecked. "You kept your word," he said at last, breaking the silence between them. "You remained." "I honor my promises," she replied, "even to enemies." A smile touched his lips. "Are we still enemies, Thora Vorsson?" The question hung between them, weighted with implication. She looked away, focusing on the moonlight dancing across the fjord's dark waters. "Our peoples are," she answered carefully. "Nothing has changed that reality. Hasn't it?" He moved closer, not touching her but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I have seen much in this past month. Saxon villages, Saxon people. I have looked upon them differently, knowing one of their princesses stands in my household." Hope flared in her chest. "You spared them?" "Where I could, yes." His expression grew troubled. "Not all raids were under my command. Eric led one ship, targeting settlements farther south." "He?" Hakon hesitated. "He does not share my growing belief that there must be a better way than endless raiding and revenge." Thora studied his face in the moonlight. Gone was the triumphant raider who had departed a month ago. In his place stood a man wrestling with doubts, with visions of a different future. "What happened on this raid, Hakon?" He was silent for a long moment. "We came upon a Saxon village, small, poorly defended. The warriors were eager for plunder after days at sea. But as we approached, I saw children playing near the shore, women working in gardens." His voice dropped lower. "I saw them as people, not merely prey. And I knew it was because of you." Her breath caught. "What did you do?" "I ordered a change in course. Claimed a storm was brewing that would trap us in the bay." A rueful smile crossed his face. "My men grumbled, but obeyed. Eric questioned me later, accused me of growing soft. Perhaps he's right. Or perhaps you're growing wiser," Thora said softly, surprising herself with the words. Hakon turned to face her fully. "During this month away, I thought of you often. Too often. I questioned what it meant, this concern for a Saxon princess who should, by all rights, be my enemy." Thora's heart thundered in her chest. "And what answer did you find?" "None that makes sense by the old ways." His hand rose, hesitating before gently touching her cheek. "Only that when I returned and saw you waiting at the shore, I felt something I have never known before." The touch of his fingers against her skin sent warmth cascading through her body. Every instinct told her to pull away, to remember who she was, who he was. Yet she found herself leaning into his touch. "This cannot be, Hakon," she whispered, even as her body betrayed her words. "I am your captive. You are my captor. The blood between our peoples runs too deep. Perhaps it is time for new blood, blood that binds rather than divides." His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. "I have made a decision about your fate, Princess of Northumbria." She stiffened, suddenly reminded of her precarious position. "And what have you decided?" "That you cannot remain a thrall. Your identity becomes harder to conceal with each passing day. Eric suspects something, though not your true lineage." His hand fell away. "When the trading ships depart for the Eastern realms in 1 week's time, you will be on one." The word struck her like a physical blow. "You're sending me away." "I'm setting you free," he corrected gently. "The ship will take you to Byzantine lands, where you can find passage home, or forge a new life, as you choose. You will have silver, protection, your freedom." Freedom. The very thing she had schemed and planned for since her arrival. Yet now that it was offered, she found herself strangely reluctant to grasp it. "Why?" she asked. "Why not ransom me? Why not keep me as leverage against my father?" Hakon's gaze was steady, his voice low with emotion he no longer tried to conceal. "Because I cannot bear to see you in chains, Thora. Because something has grown between us that defies all reason. Because?" He paused, seemingly wrestling with himself before continuing. "Because I think I am falling in love with you, and love cannot exist where there is no choice." The word struck her like summer lightning, unexpected, brilliant, transformative. In that moment, standing beneath the vast northern sky, Thora confronted the truth she had been denying for weeks. "And if I choose to stay?" The words emerged barely above a whisper. Hope blazed in his eyes. "Can you? Would you renounce your home, your birthright?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know that when I thought you might not return from raiding, I could scarcely breathe for fear. I know that in these months as your thrall, I have seen more honor in you than in many noble-born men of my father's court." She took a shuddering breath. "I know that I should hate you and all you represent. Yet each day, that hatred diminishes while something else grows in its place." Hakon stepped closer, his hands gently framing her face. "Then we have 1 week, Princess. 1 week to decide if what grows between us is strong enough to withstand the storms that would surely come." In the silver moonlight, with the sounds of celebration floating up from the settlement below, Thora made a choice that would forever alter her path. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a question asked and answered in the meeting of mouths. Then it deepened, becoming something fierce and honest and transformative. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as though she were precious beyond measure. Her fingers threaded through his hair, anchoring herself to him as the world seemed to spin around them. When they finally parted, breathless and trembling, Thora knew that whatever choice she made in a week's time, nothing would ever be the same. She had crossed a boundary as surely as she had crossed the sea, from enemy to something else entirely. 1 week, she agreed, her voice unsteady. To decide where my heart truly belongs. The days that followed passed in a dizzying blur for Thora. By day, she maintained her disguise as Tara the thrall, performing her duties while carefully avoiding Eric's increasingly suspicious gaze. By night, she met Hakon in secret, sometimes in his private chambers, sometimes on the hillside beneath the stars. They spoke of their childhoods, their dreams, the weight of responsibilities they both carried. He told her of his vision for Ravholm's future, trade routes extending east to the great cities of Miklagard, settlements built on cooperation rather than conquest. She shared stories of her mother's wisdom, her training in diplomacy, her love for her people. Each conversation, each shared confidence, each brush of hands or meeting of lips, bound them more tightly together. Yet the shadow of choice loomed ever larger as the trading ship's departure drew nearer. 5 days after the raiders' return, as Thora gathered herbs in the forest beyond the settlement, she was startled by the crack of a twig behind her. She turned to find Eric watching her, his expression thunderous. "Who are you really?" he demanded without preamble. Thora straightened, keeping her expression neutral. "I don't understand." "I am Tara, lies." He advanced on her, gripping her arm painfully. "I've watched you. The way you speak when you forget yourself. The way you observe everything like a trained scout. The way my brother looks at you. Fear crawled up her spine, but she forced herself to remain calm. Release me. Hakon would not approve of you manhandling his thrall. Hakon, Eirik spat the name. My brother grows weak. He aborted a raid on a defenseless Saxon village. He speaks of treaties instead of conquest. And now he sneaks away with a thrall each night, thinking no one notices. He tightened his grip, making her wince. What spell have you cast on him, Saxon witch? What secrets do you whisper in his ear? None, she insisted. I am nothing, then explain this. With his free hand, Eirik gripped at her tunic collar, tearing the fabric to reveal the royal brooch she kept hidden there. I saw this glint beneath your clothing when you bent to serve mead. No merchant's daughter wears such a treasure. Horror washed through Thora as Eirik examined the brooch, recognition dawning in his cold eyes. This is the royal crest of Northumbria, he whispered, fury building in his voice. You're not just any Saxon. You're nobility. Perhaps even. His eyes widened. By the gods. You're the daughter of King Vorsson. Thora didn't deny it. There was no point now. Instead, she tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. Does my brother know? When she didn't answer, Eirik shook her roughly. Does he? Yes, she admitted, seeing no benefit in lying. He discovered my identity before the raid. Eirik's face contorted with rage and something like triumph. And he kept it secret. Harbored our enemy. Bedded the daughter of the man who executed our kinsman. He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. The Jarls will strip him of leadership for this treachery. It isn't treachery, Thora argued. He plans to send me away on the trading ship. He's protecting both me and Ravholm. Protecting? Eirik's voice rose. He's squandering the greatest advantage we've ever had against Northumbria. With you as hostage, we could demand territory, silver, immunity from Saxon reprisals. Instead, he thinks with his cock instead of his head. He began dragging her back toward the settlement. The people will know the truth. Tonight, at the feast, I will expose both your identity and my brother's betrayal. Panic surged through Thora. If Eirik revealed her in the Great Hall, surrounded by warriors still flushed with raiding success, her life would be measured in moments. And Hakon, his leadership, perhaps even his life, would be forfeit. With strength born of desperation, she twisted in Eirik's grip, driving her knee upward with all her might. He doubled over with a howl of pain, his hold loosening just enough for her to break free. Without hesitation, she fled deeper into the forest, heart pounding in her ears. Behind her, Eirik's enraged shouts echoed through the trees. She ran blindly, branches whipping at her face, roots threatening to trip her with each step. She had no plan beyond immediate escape, and warning Hakon. The forest eventually gave way to rocky terrain as she climbed higher into the hills surrounding the settlement. Out of breath and disoriented, Thora paused in the shelter of a large boulder. Her torn tunic fluttered in the wind, the royal brooch now missing, torn away in her struggle with Eirik or lost during her flight. Below, she could see Ravholm spread out like a child's toy village. Tiny figures moved between buildings, unaware of the drama unfolding in the hills above. Somewhere among them was Hakon, going about his duties, not knowing that his brother now possessed the knowledge that could destroy them both. Night would fall soon. The feast would begin. Eirik would denounce them before the entire settlement. She had to reach Hakon first. The sunset painted Ravholm in hues of gold and crimson as Thora crept back toward the settlement. She had spent hours hiding in the hills, watching for pursuit, planning her approach. Now, as villagers gathered for the evening meal, she used the deepening shadows to conceal her movement between buildings. Hakon's longhouse stood at the settlement center, adjacent to the Great Hall. She needed to reach it unseen, a nearly impossible task with people moving about preparing for the feast. As she hesitated in the shadow of a storage shed, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. She struggled instinctively until a familiar voice whispered in her ear. "Quiet, girl. It's only me. Sigrid." Relief flooded through Thora as the healer released her. "Eirik knows," Thora gasped. "He found my brooch. He knows everything." Sigrid's weathered face grew grave. "I feared as much. He's been gathering the Jarls and elder warriors all afternoon, speaking of betrayal and Saxon spies." She gripped Thora's arm. "You cannot stay here. Even now, men search the forests for you. I must warn Hakon. My nephew is not in the settlement. He sailed to the southern fjord this morning to settle a dispute between fishing families. He won't return until tomorrow." Sigrid's expression hardened. "By then, it may be too late for both of you." Despair threatened to overwhelm Thora. "What can I do?" "Run." Sigrid pressed a small bundle into Thora's hands. "Food, a knife, a water skin. Go north along the coast. There's a small cove 2 days' walk from here where traders sometimes shelter. You might find passage on a ship." "And Hakon?" "I will try to reach him, warn him of what comes." Sigrid's eyes softened. "He cares for you deeply, princess. I have never seen him look at anyone as he looks at you." Tears pricked at Thora's eyes. "I care for him too. More than I should. The heart knows no should or shouldn't." Sigrid touched Thora's cheek in a maternal gesture. "Now go. Night gives you cover, but by dawn, every warrior in Ravholm will hunt you." Thora clutched the bundle to her chest. "Thank you, Sigrid. For everything." The older woman nodded once. "May your gods and ours watch over you, child." With that blessing, Thora slipped away into the gathering darkness, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she might never see Hakon again. Behind her, the glow of Ravholm's fires slowly diminished as she made her way north along treacherous coastal paths, guided only by starlight and the distant sound of waves breaking against rocks below. By midnight, exhaustion forced her to seek shelter in the hollow of a great tree. As she huddled there, trying to ignore the cold seeping into her bones, Thora found herself praying, not for her own safety, but for Hakon's. "Please," she whispered to gods both old and new, "protect him. Let him live, even if we never meet again." Sleep claimed her eventually, dreams filled with stormy seas and Hakon's face disappearing beneath the waves. Dawn broke grey and misty over the coastal headlands. Thora woke stiff and cold, momentarily disoriented until memory rushed back, Eirik's discovery, her flight, Sigrid's warning. She forced herself to eat some of the dried meat from her bundle before continuing north, staying within the tree line to avoid being spotted from the sea. By midday, rain began to fall, a gentle drizzle that gradually intensified until water ran in rivulets down her face and neck. Her borrowed clothes, already torn from her escape through the forest, became sodden weights that chilled her to the bone. Still, she pressed on, knowing that to stop meant certain capture. The sound of hoofbeats reached her ears late in the afternoon. Distant at first, then growing closer. Riders on the path below. Heart racing, Thora scrambled up a rocky slope, seeking higher ground and better concealment. From her vantage point, she saw them, 5 mounted warriors moving swiftly along the coastal trail, their cloaks dark with rain. At their head rode Eirik, his golden hair visible even in the gloom. Hunting her. She pressed herself against wet stone, scarcely daring to breathe as they passed below. They continued north, following the path she would have taken had she remained on the lower trail. A small mercy, but one that wouldn't last. Experienced trackers would eventually realize their quarry had moved to higher ground. Night was approaching again, bringing with it plummeting temperatures and the threat of exposure. Thora needed shelter, warmth, a defensible position. As the riders disappeared around a bend in the coastline, she resumed her journey, now cutting inland toward higher, rockier terrain where horses would struggle to follow. The climb was treacherous, made worse by rain-slick rocks and failing light. Twice she nearly fell, catching herself at the last moment. Her hands bled from gripping sharp stone, her lungs burned with exertion. But fear drove her onward, fear of capture, fear of what Eirik would do to her, fear for Hakon's fate when he returned to find his leadership challenged and his brother thirsting for revenge. As darkness settled fully across the land, Thora spotted what appeared to be a crevice in the rock face ahead, perhaps large enough to provide shelter for the night. She approached cautiously, wary of wild animals that might have claimed it as their den. The opening was narrow but deepened into a small cave, dry and seemingly unoccupied. Thora squeezed inside, collapsing onto the stone floor in exhaustion. Using flint from her bundle, she managed to kindle a small fire using twigs and moss gathered near the entrance. The tiny flame cast dancing shadows on the cave walls but provided blessed warmth. As feeling returned to her numbed fingers and toes, Thora assessed her situation with brutal honesty. She was alone in hostile territory, hunted by skilled warriors, with minimal supplies and no clear path to safety. The trading ship that might have carried her to freedom would sail without her. Her father believed her dead, so no rescue would come from Northumbria. And Hakon, the man who had somehow claimed her heart despite everything that should have kept them apart, would face his brother's wrath without her. What would mother do, she whispered to herself, remembering the woman who had taught her that a princess's greatest weapon was not sword or shield but mind and heart. Queen Aelfald had been captured during a Saxon conflict when Thora was just a child. Rather than breaking under captivity, she had studied her captors, learned their weaknesses, and eventually negotiated not just her own release but a peace treaty that lasted 3 years. Turn disadvantage to advantage, she had told Thora afterward. See opportunity where others see only obstacles. What opportunity existed in her current predicament? What advantage could she possibly claim? The answer came slowly as she stared into the flickering flames. She was not merely a fugitive princess. She was the daughter of a king, trained in diplomacy and statecraft. If she could somehow reach her father's court, she could speak of what she had seen among the Northmen, of Hakon's vision for trade rather than raids, of communities that thrived through skill rather than simply plunder. Could peace be possible between their peoples? Most would scoff at the notion. The blood feud ran too deep, the cultural differences too vast. And yet, if she and Hakon could bridge the divide as individuals, perhaps there was hope for a broader understanding. But first, she had to survive the night. And somehow evade Eric's hunting party long enough to find a way home, or back to Hakon. With that thought warming her more effectively than the small fire, Thora settled against the cave wall, knife clutched in hand, and allowed herself a few hours of fitful sleep. The thunderous crack of splitting wood woke Hakon from uneasy dreams. He bolted upright on his sleeping platform, instantly alert as shouts erupted outside the fishing village's guest house where he had spent the night. Fire! The storehouses burn! He grabbed his sword and rushed outside to find chaos. Flames leapt from the settlement's grain storage, villagers forming a bucket chain from the nearby stream. Without hesitation, he joined their efforts, passing water and helping to contain the blaze before it could spread to nearby dwellings. Dawn was breaking by the time the fire was extinguished, leaving charred timber and the acrid smell of smoke hanging in the air. As Hakon helped clear debris, a rider appeared on the path leading to the settlement, one of his own men from Ravholm, his horse lathered from hard riding. Jarl Hakon, the man called, dismounting. You must return immediately. There is trouble. Cold dread settled in Hakon's stomach as the warrior approached. What trouble, Gunnar? The man glanced around nervously before lowering his voice. It's your brother, my lord. He has called a thing assembly. He claims you harbor a Saxon royal, that you have betrayed our people for the sake of a foreign woman. Hakon's blood turned to ice. Thora, he whispered. Where is she? Is she safe? The Saxon thrall fled yesterday after Eric confronted her in the forest. He leads a hunting party to capture her. Gunnar's expression was grave. Jarl, he showed the elders a royal brooch he claims belonged to her, bearing the crest of Northumbria's king. And the people? What do they say? They are divided. Some call for your return to answer the charges. Others defend you, saying Eric seeks only to claim your position. Gunnar hesitated. Sigrid sent me. She says you must return swiftly if you wish to retain leadership, but cautiously, as Eric has gathered many supporters. Hakon's mind raced. Thora, alone in the wilderness, hunted like prey. His leadership challenged. his vision for Ravholm's future threatened. All because he had fallen in love with a woman who should have been his enemy. Yet he could not bring himself to regret it. "Ready my horse," he ordered. "We ride for Ravholm immediately." As his men prepared for departure, Hakon pulled Gunnar aside. "Tell me truthfully, which direction did Eric's hunting party take?" "North along the coast, my lord. They believe she heads for the trading coves." Hakon nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "Return to Ravholm ahead of me. Tell Sigrid to prepare for a thing assembly. I will face my accusers, but first, there is something I must do." Confusion crossed Gunnar's features, but he nodded. "As you command, Jarl." Within the hour, Hakon rode out, not directly toward Ravholm, but on a path that would intercept the northern coastal route. His heart pounded with determination and fear. Eric had a day's head start in the hunt for Thora. If his brother found her first? Hakon refused to complete the thought. Instead, he urged his horse faster, praying to all the gods that he would reach her in time. The second day of Thora's flight dawned clear and cold. Her fire had died during the night, leaving her shivering in the cave's darkness. Every muscle protested as she forced herself to move, to eat the last of her provisions, to continue her journey north. The higher elevation gave her a commanding view of the coastline below. In the clear morning light, she could see the fjord stretching away to the south, and to the north, the rocky headlands that concealed the trading cove Sigrid had mentioned. If she could reach it by nightfall, there might be ships, a chance at escape. Movement on the coastal path caught her eye. Eric's hunting party, still searching, now spread. Thora ducked back from the ridge. She would need to be more careful now, avoiding open ground where she might be spotted from below. The rocky terrain offered concealment but made for difficult travel. By midday, her feet were bloody inside her worn boots, her hands scraped raw from climbing. As she paused to catch her breath in the shadow of a large boulder, voices drifted up from below, close enough that she could make out words. "She can't have gone far," came Eric's distinctive voice. A Saxon princess raised in luxury wouldn't know how to survive in these hills. "Perhaps she fell from the cliffs," suggested another voice. "The rocks below would hide a body." "No," Eric's tone was certain. "She lives. I can feel it. And when I find her, she will wish for death before I grant it." The hatred in his voice chilled Thora more effectively than the mountain air. This was not merely about her identity or even Hakon's leadership. For Eric, this was personal vengeance, for his dead wife, for perceived betrayal, for all the grievances Norsemen held against Saxons. She waited, scarcely breathing, until their voices faded as they moved farther along the path. Then she continued northward, keeping to the highest ground where horses couldn't follow and men would find climbing difficult. The sun had begun its westward descent when disaster struck. As Thora navigated a particularly steep section, loose stones gave way beneath her foot. She scrambled for purchase but found none. With a strangled cry, she fell, tumbling down the rocky slope, unable to stop her descent. Pain exploded through her body as she struck rock after rock, finally coming to rest on a narrow ledge halfway down the hillside. For several moments, she lay stunned, the world spinning around her. When she tried to rise, agony shot through her left ankle. Sprained or broken, she couldn't tell, but either way, her flight had just become exponentially more difficult. Worse, her fall had dislodged a small avalanche of stones that clattered noisily down the hillside. If any of Eric's men were nearby, they would certainly investigate the sound. Fighting waves of pain and nausea, Thora dragged herself to the edge of the ledge, looking for a path downward. The drop to the next stable surface was too far for her to manage with an injured ankle. She was trapped, unable to climb back up, unable to descend further. As the reality of her situation sank in, tears of frustration and pain welled in her eyes. After everything, the shipwreck, captivity, finding unexpected love, fleeing for her life, to be defeated by a loose stone and gravity seemed a cruel jest of the gods. The sound of approaching voices confirmed her worst fears. Her fall had been heard. Hunters approached. Soon they would spot her on her exposed perch. Thora gripped her small knife, knowing it would provide little defense but determined to meet her fate with courage. If she was to die here, far from home and the man she had come to love, she would do so as befitted a princess of Northumbria, with dignity and defiance. The voices grew closer. Thora pressed herself against the rock face, hoping against hope for some miracle. Then a shadow fell across the ledge as a figure appeared above her. "There you are," said a familiar voice that was decidedly not Eric's. "I've been looking everywhere for you, princess." Thora looked up in disbelief. "Hakon?" His bearded face broke into a relieved smile as he secured a rope to a boulder. "Can you climb if I lower this to you?" She gestured to her injured ankle. "I don't think so." Without hesitation, Hakon began descending the rope himself, moving with the practiced ease of one accustomed to scaling ship's rigging. Within moments, he reached her ledge, crouching beside her to examine her injury. "Sprained, not broken, I think," he said after gentle probing that still made her wince. "But you won't be outrunning my brother's hunting party." "How did you find me?" she asked, still stunned by his appearance. "I know these hills," he said simply. Then, more softly, "and I know you. I guessed you'd take the high ground, defensible, with good visibility." His hand cupped her cheek. "When I heard what Eric had done, I feared I might be too late." The tenderness in his touch nearly undid her. "He wants me dead, Hakon." "And you deposed?" "I know." His expression hardened. "But neither will happen today. Can you hold on to my back? I can carry you up the rope." It was their only option. Gritting her teeth against the pain, Thora allowed Hakon to position her on his back, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck, her good leg hooked around his waist. With incredible strength, he began climbing the rope one-handed, the other arm supporting her weight. By the time they reached the top, both were breathing heavily from exertion. Hakon didn't pause, lifting Thora into his arms and carrying her quickly away from the edge, deeper into a stand of twisted pine trees that offered concealment. "My horse is tethered nearby," he explained as he set her down gently against a tree trunk. "But we can't risk the coastal path, Eric's men patrol it heavily." "Then what do we do?" Thora asked, fighting to keep fear from her voice. Hakon's eyes met hers, determination evident in their blue depths. "We return to Ravholm." "Ravholm?" "But that's where Eric is gathering support against me, yes." He took her hands in his. "Thora, I could help you reach the trading cove. I could put you on a ship bound for Byzantine lands or even try to arrange passage to Northumbria. But that would mean running from this conflict, and neither of us are runners." He was right. Running would solve nothing. Eric's hatred would fester. The divide between their peoples would remain unbridged. And they would be separated forever. "What do you propose instead?" she asked. "We face the thing assembly together. You as who you truly are, Princess Thora Vorsson of Northumbria. I as Jarl Hakon, who believes there can be a future beyond raiding and blood feuds." His grip on her hands tightened. "It will be dangerous. Many will call for your death and my removal. But if we succeed, we could forge a new path," she finished, understanding blooming within her. "A path of trade and alliance rather than endless warfare." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Exactly. But I will not force this choice upon you. If you wish to flee, I will help you." Thora looked into the face of the man who had first been her captor, then her protector, and now, against all odds, the keeper of her heart. In him, she saw not an enemy but a visionary who, like her, dreamed of something better than the cycle of vengeance that had claimed so many lives on both sides. "My mother once told me that true courage isn't facing battle without fear," she said softly. "It's being terrified but standing your ground anyway, because what you fight for matters more than your fear." She straightened, decision made. "I will stand with you before your thing assembly, Hakon Arnorsson. Let us see if together we can build a bridge where others have only raised swords." Relief and love washed over his features. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers in an intimate gesture. "Whatever comes, know that finding you was worth any price I may pay." As the sun began to set over the distant sea, Hakon fashioned a crude splint for Thora's ankle. Then, cradling her in his arms, he carried her to where his horse waited, hidden among the trees. Together they would ride through the night, taking hidden paths back to Ravholm, back to face whatever fate awaited them. The great hall of Ravholm hummed with tension. Every available space was filled as free men and women gathered for the emergency thing assembly. Elders and respected warriors sat closest to the central hearth, their faces grave in the flickering firelight. Hushed conversation ceased abruptly as the doors swung open. Hakon entered first, his bearing regal despite the exhaustion of their night journey. Thora followed, limping slightly despite the more proper splint Sigrid had applied to her ankle before the assembly. She had been bathed, her torn clothes replaced with a simple but clean dress belonging to one of the village women. Around her neck, visible to all, hung a pendant Hakon had given her, a small silver Thor's hammer, symbolizing protection. Eirik stood by the high seat, his expression darkening at their entrance. "So the traitor returns," he called, voice carrying through the hall. "And brings his Saxon whore to face us." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hakon's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure, leading Thora toward the central hearth where matters of importance were decided. "I return to address false accusations," he replied evenly. "And I bring with me Princess Thora Vorsson of Northumbria, who comes not as captive or enemy, but as one who seeks understanding between our peoples." "Understanding?" Eirik spat. "She is the daughter of the man who executed 20 of our warriors after the raid on York. Her father's men slaughtered my wife while she gathered shellfish on our own shores." He turned to address the assembly. "And my brother harbored her among us, concealed her identity." Angry shouts erupted from some quarters, while others remained silent, watching carefully. Thora felt the weight of dozens of hostile gazes upon her, yet she kept her head high, her expression dignified as her mother had taught her. Thorvald, the grey-bearded law-speaker, raised his staff for silence. When the hall quieted, he addressed Hakon. "Serious charges have been laid against you, son of Orna. How do you answer?" Hakon stepped forward. "I admit I discovered this woman's identity and kept it secret. I did so not out of treachery, but because I saw an opportunity, one that could benefit all of Ravholm." "What opportunity comes from bedding our enemy?" called a voice from the crowd. "Not that," Hakon replied sharply. "The opportunity to forge a different path forward. For generations, we have raided Saxon shores, and they have killed our people in return. Blood calls for blood without end. But what has this cycle brought us? Temporary wealth. Permanent enemies. Widows and orphans on both sides." He moved to stand beside Thora. "In Princess Thora, I saw someone who, like me, questions whether there might be a better way. Trade instead of raiding. Alliance instead of enmity. Prosperity built on skill and commerce rather than plunder." Eirik laughed bitterly. "Pretty words from a man who thinks with his cock instead of his head. The Saxons would never honor such agreements. They call us heathens, animals. They seek only to drive us from their shores or convert us to their nailed god. Some do." Thora spoke for the first time, her clear voice causing many to lean forward in surprise. "Just as some of your people seek only blood and conquest. But there are those on both sides who desire peace." She addressed the assembly directly. "I was raised to fear and hate the Northmen. My mother and brother were killed in a raid 7 summers past. By your customs, I should seek vengeance against all of you." Her gaze swept the hall. "Yet in my time among you, first as captive, then as thrall, I have seen another truth. I have seen people who value honor, who cherish their children, who seek wisdom alongside strength." Murmurs rose again, some thoughtful, others skeptical. An older warrior near the front spoke up. "Pretty words from a Saxon princess, but words mean little. What guarantee could we have that your people would honor any agreement? That your father wouldn't send warriors against us the moment you returned?" It was a fair question, one Thora had anticipated. "I offer myself as that guarantee," she said steadily. "I would remain here, not as thrall but as pledge. A living symbol of my father's commitment to any treaty we might forge." Gasps and exclamations greeted this declaration. Even Hakon looked surprised. They had discussed facing the thing together but not this specific proposal. "And why would your father agree to this?" asked Thorvald, his rheumy eyes sharp with interest. "Why would he not simply believe you dead in the shipwreck?" "Because I would send proof of my survival, along with terms that would benefit both our peoples." Thora straightened despite her painful ankle. "My father is a practical man. Given the choice between believing me lost forever or securing both my safety and advantageous trade rights, he would choose the latter." Eirik stepped forward, face flushed with anger. "This is madness. She weaves a spell of lies. The only language Saxons understand is steel and fire." He drew his sword, pointing it at Thora. "I say we send her head to her father as message that the Northmen cannot be deceived by pretty words and a woman's body." Several warriors shouted agreement, hands moving to weapon hilts. Hakon stepped protectively in front of Thora, his own hand on his sword. The hall teetered on the edge of violence. "Enough!" The voice that cut through the chaos belonged to Sigrid. The healer stepped into the circle, her aged frame somehow commanding despite her lack of weapons. "Would you shed blood in the sacred hall? Would you violate the peace of the thing? Such actions would bring the gods' wrath upon us all." She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. "I have lived through 3 generations of Jarls. I have bound the wounds of raiders and buried those who did not return. I have watched our children grow up believing that glory comes only from battle and plunder." Her voice softened. "And I have grown weary of it." Sigrid moved to stand beside Hakon and Thora. "My nephew proposes a new path. This Saxon princess offers herself as pledge for peace. Instead of dismissing their vision as madness, should we not at least consider that there might be wisdom in seeking something beyond endless bloodshed?" A thoughtful silence fell over the hall. Thorvald stroked his beard, considering. "The proposal has merit," he admitted grudgingly. Trade with Saxon lands could bring great wealth without the risk of raiding. And having the king's daughter as pledge would give a significant advantage. "It is weakness," Eirik insisted. "The old ways have served us well. We are warriors, not merchants." "We can be both," Hakon countered. "The eastern routes have brought us riches through trade for generations. Why not western routes as well? Our children could grow up learning both sword and scales, knowing both how to fight and how to bargain." As debate erupted throughout the hall, Thora noticed something significant. The division was not merely between those who supported Hakon and those who backed Eirik. It fell largely along age lines. The younger members of the community seemed more receptive to Hakon's vision, while the older warriors clung to traditional ways. The future versus the past. Change versus tradition. The same battle fought in courts and councils throughout the world, she realized. Thorvald raised his staff again, calling for order. "This matter affects all of Ravholm and potentially our relations with other settlements. It cannot be decided hastily." He turned to Hakon. "You remain Jarl until the thing determines otherwise. The Saxon princess will be held securely, not as thrall, but as honored hostage, while we deliberate." He fixed Eirik with a stern gaze. "No harm is to come to her during this time. The gods watch, and they do not favor those who abuse guests or hostages." Though clearly dissatisfied, Eirik nodded stiffly. "As the thing wills. But know this, brother," he added, turning to Hakon. "This is not finished between us." As the assembly dispersed, Thora found herself surrounded by Hakon's loyal warriors, escorted to a small but comfortable dwelling near Sigrid's home. The healer accompanied her, checking her ankle and providing herbs for the pain. "You were brave today," Sigrid said as she worked. "Braver than many warriors I've known." "I was terrified," Thora admitted. "I still am. As you should be. Fear keeps us alert to danger." Sigrid finished bandaging the ankle. "But I believe you may have swayed some minds today." "Not all, certainly. Eirik's grievance runs too deep, and others share his hatred. But enough, perhaps." When they were alone, Hakon visited briefly, concern evident in his eyes. Are you certain about offering yourself as pledge? That wasn't part of our plan. Thora reached for his hand. It was the only guarantee powerful enough to make them consider peace. And she hesitated. It would mean I could stay with you. The implications hung between them, a future neither had dared articulate until now. Hakon lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. If the thing agrees to your proposal, we would need to send messengers to your father immediately, he said. Are you certain he would negotiate rather than simply attack? He is a king before he is a father, Thora replied honestly. He will calculate the advantages and disadvantages carefully. But yes, I believe he would negotiate, especially if I write to him myself. Hakon nodded, hope warring with caution in his expression. Rest now. Tomorrow brings another day of deliberation. Eirik will not surrender his position easily. As he turned to leave, Thora called after him softly. Hakon. He paused at the door. No matter what happens, whether they accept our vision or not, know that meeting you has changed me. Forever. The love that blazed in his eyes as he looked back at her was answer enough. 3 days of intense deliberation followed. The Thing assembly met from sunrise to sunset, arguments flowing back and forth like tide against shore. Thora was permitted to address the council twice more, answering questions about Saxon trade practices, her father's temperament, and the potential terms of any agreement. Eirik fought fiercely against the proposal, reminding all who would listen of Saxon treacheries past and present. Yet even he could not deny the potential benefits of secure trade routes to English shores, benefits that extended beyond simple raiding wealth to long-term prosperity. On the 4th morning, as pale sun, 2 messengers will depart tomorrow for Northumbria, Thorvald continued. They will carry Princess Thora's proof of life and propose terms to her father. Until his response is received, she will remain under guard but treated with the respect due her station. He fixed Thora with a penetrating gaze. If your father rejects these terms or attempts treachery, understand that your life will be forfeit. I understand, Thora replied steadily. And I accept these conditions. Then it is decided. Thorvald struck his staff against the floor 3 times, sealing the judgment. May the gods favor this new path we forge. As the assembly dispersed, Hakon and Thora shared a private moment near the hearth. It is more than I dared hope for, he admitted quietly. Though Eirik's new position concerns me. He will not abandon his grievances easily. No, she agreed. But it gives us time to prove that our vision can work. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. I'll compose the trade proposals today. What will you write to your father? Thora thought of the man who had raised her, stern but fair, devoted to his kingdom's prosperity even above family bonds. The truth, she said finally. That I live. That I have seen another way forward. That this opportunity may never come again in our lifetime. Hakon's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. And what of us? Will you tell him that part of the truth as well? The question hung between them, laden with meaning. What had begun as captor and captive had transformed into something neither could have imagined, a love that defied centuries of enmity, that challenged the very foundations of their respective worlds. I will tell him that I have found someone who sees beyond the boundaries of hate, she replied softly. Someone who dreams of building rather than destroying. Whether he will understand such a thing? She shrugged. That remains to be seen. 2 months passed with agonizing slowness. Autumn painted the hillsides in russet and gold as Ravholm awaited word from Northumbria. During this time, Thora's position evolved from hostage to something more complex. Though still guarded, she was permitted to move freely within the settlement, participating in daily activities and even teaching some of the children Saxon words and songs. Her relationship with Hakon deepened, though they maintained public discretion out of respect for the community's divided feelings. In private moments, walks along the shoreline, quiet conversations beside the hearth in his chambers, they allowed themselves to hope for a future together, even as they prepared for disappointment. Eirik remained a shadow over their tentative happiness. Though he adhered to the Thing's judgment, his hostility simmered just beneath the surface. he trained warriors with increased intensity, spoke openly of the folly of trusting Saxons, and watched his brother and Thora with barely concealed contempt. The first snow had just dusted Ravholm's rooftops when the lookout spotted sails on the horizon, not the expected return of their messengers, but a Saxon ship flying the royal standard of Northumbria. The settlement erupted in controlled panic. Warriors gathered weapons. Women hurried children indoors. Eirik organized defensive positions along the shoreline. Hakon found Thora in Sigrid's dwelling, where she had been learning the healing properties of northern herbs. "Your father's ship approaches," he said without preamble, his expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Not our messengers returning, but a royal vessel." Thora's heart leapt to her throat. "Has he come himself?" "We cannot tell yet. But we must prepare for any possibility." He took her hands in his. "If this is an attack force, it won't be," she interrupted. "My father is many things, but he is not foolish. He would not risk my life with an outright assault. Unless he believes you are already dead or mistreated beyond redemption." Hakon's grip tightened. "Thora, if conflict erupts, you must stay with Sigrid. Regardless of what happens between our peoples, I need to know you are safe." The fear in his eyes, not for himself but for her, nearly undid her. "I will not hide while men die on my account," she said firmly. "If my father has come, I must meet him. I must show him that what I wrote was truth, not coercion." Before Hakon could argue further, Eirik burst in, eyes blazing with barely suppressed excitement. "The Saxon ship requests parley," he announced. "They fly a white flag alongside their standard." Relief flooded through Thora. "Parley means negotiation, not attack." "Or it means deception," Eirik countered. "A way to get close enough to strike." Hakon straightened, decision made. "We will meet them at the shore. A small party only, myself, Eirik, Thorvald, and Princess Thora. The rest of our warriors will remain ready, but out of immediate sight." Eirik scowled but nodded. "I've already positioned archers on the bluffs. If the Saxons attempt treachery, they will not leave our fjord alive." As the brothers left to prepare, Sigrid helped Thora dress in the finest clothing available, a blue woolen dress with simple embroidery at neck and sleeves, her hair braided in the Norse style but with a circlet of polished amber beads to signify her royal status. Around her neck hung both the Thor's hammer Hakon had given her and her own Christian cross, symbols of the two worlds she now bridged. "Whatever happens today," Sigrid said as she fastened the dress, "know that you have changed Ravholm. Whether for better or worse remains to be seen, but change was needed." Thora embraced the older woman, finding unexpected tears in her eyes. "Thank you for your wisdom, Sigrid. For your kindness when I was nothing but an enemy in your eyes." "You were never just an enemy to me," Sigrid replied softly. "You were a young woman far from home, trying to survive. Much like I was once, long ago." She pulled back, studying Thora's face. "Now go. Show both your people and ours that new paths can be forged, even through the deepest snow." The shore of Ravholm's fjord had never seemed so small as it did with two opposing parties facing each other across wet sand. On one side stood Hakon, Eirik, Thorvald, and Thora. On the other, having just disembarked from a small boat, stood for Saxons, 3 warriors in chainmail and leather, and one older man whose bearing and rich clothing marked him as nobility. Thora's breath caught in her throat. Not her father, but someone almost as significant. "Lord Evald," she whispered to Hakon. "My father's brother and chief advisor." Evald's stern gaze found her immediately, relief visibly washing over his features before being quickly masked by diplomatic reserve. He stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Princess Thora. When your ship failed to reach its destination, we believed you lost to the sea. Your letter came as both shock and blessing to your father." His eye scanned her carefully. "You appear well. Have you been treated with the respect due your station?" The formal language of court diplomacy felt strange after months of more direct Norse communication. "I have, uncle. Jarl Hakon and his people have shown me courtesy beyond what might be expected under the circumstances." Edald nodded, then turned his attention to Hakon. "You are the leader here." "I am Hakon Arnorsson, Jarl of Ravholm." Hakon's Norse accent colored his Saxon speech, but his words were clear and measured. "This is my brother, Eirik, commander of our warriors, and Thorvald, our law speaker. I bring greetings from King Vorsson of Northumbria." Edald's tone remained neutral. He has considered the proposal sent by his daughter and is prepared to discuss terms for trade relations between our peoples. A flicker of surprise crossed Eirik's face. Clearly, he had expected outright rejection or demands for Thora's immediate return. Hakon maintained his composure, though Thora could see hope kindling in his eyes. "We welcome such discussion," Hakon replied. "Will you join us in our hall, where we might speak more comfortably?" Tension hung in the air as Edald considered the invitation. To enter the Viking settlement would place him at their mercy. Yet to refuse would suggest distrust that might derail negotiations before they began. "I will," he said finally. "2 of my men will accompany me. The 3rd will return to our ship to inform the captain that talks proceed peacefully." With that agreement, the unlikely procession made its way from the shore to Ravholm's great hall. Villagers watched from doorways, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Saxon visitors, peaceful ones, at least, were unprecedented in living memory. In the hall, mead was served and formal introductions made. As the initial diplomatic courtesies were observed, Thora found herself studying her uncle carefully. Though his exterior remained impassive, she knew him well enough to read the subtle signs of his true thoughts, the slight furrow between his brows indicating concern, the occasional glance in her direction suggesting questions he could not yet ask openly. When preliminary pleasantries concluded, Edald produced a sealed parchment bearing her father's insignia. Murmurs erupted among the Norse leaders. The terms were more favorable than many had expected, offering access to wealthy Saxon ports that had previously been closed to them except through raiding. "And after 3 years?" Hakon asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "After 3 years, if the agreement has been honored by both sides, it may be renewed, and the princess would be given the choice to return to Northumbria or—" Edald hesitated, something like reluctant understanding crossing his features as he observed the way Thora and Hakon exchanged glances. "Or to remain, under terms to be negotiated at that time." It was more than they had dared hope for. Thora felt her heart swell with unexpected joy. 3 years of peace. 3 years to prove that cooperation could replace conflict. 3 years during which she and Hakon might build something lasting between their peoples, and between themselves. Thorvald stroked his beard thoughtfully. "These terms seem fair, but we must consult with the thing before giving final answer." "Of course," Edald agreed. King Vorsson anticipated such need for consultation. "Our ship will anchor in your fjord for 3 days, awaiting your response." As formal discussion gave way to more specific details of the proposed trade agreement, Edald requested a private word with his niece. They stepped outside the hall, finding a quiet spot near the shore where they could speak without being overheard, though guards from both sides maintained a respectful distance. "Now tell me the truth, child," Edald said once they were alone. "Your letter spoke of opportunity and new understanding, but said little of how you came to be here or why you wish to remain as pledge." Thora told him everything, the shipwreck, her rescue, her time as a thrall, and the gradual change in her perspective as she came to know the Norse people not as faceless raiders but as individuals with their own dreams, values, and vision. She hesitated only when it came to speaking of Hakon. How could she explain the impossible bond that had formed between them, enemy and captor, Saxon and Norseman, princess and jarl? Edald, ever perceptive, saw what she did not say. "You care for this Viking leader," he observed, his tone carefully neutral. "More than political expedience would dictate." Thora lifted her chin. "I love him, uncle. Against all reason, against all the hatred our peoples have nursed for generations. And he loves me." The admission hung between them, at once shocking and somehow inevitable. Edald sighed deeply. "Your father suspected as much from the tone of your letter. It is why he sent me rather than coming himself. He feared his own reaction upon seeing his daughter allied in heart with those he has fought his entire life." Does he oppose the match? Thora asked, bracing herself for the answer. He is conflicted. As king, he sees the potential advantage in a daughter wed to a Norse leader, if such a union could truly secure lasting peace. As father, Ethild shook his head. As father, he struggles with the thought of his only surviving child among those he has taught himself to hate. He took her hands in his expression softening. But he loves you, Thora. Enough to consider possibilities he would have rejected outright before your letter arrived. Enough to offer 3 years of peace when his advisors counseled immediate attack. Relief and gratitude washed through her. Thank you for telling me this, uncle. And thank you for coming yourself. I volunteered, he admitted. I wanted to see with my own eyes whether you wrote freely or under compulsion. Whether these Vikings were capable of the honor your letter attributed to them. His gaze swept over Ravholm, taking in the well-ordered buildings, the children playing, the everyday life of a community not so different from Saxon villages. I begin to think perhaps they are. As they returned to the great hall, Thora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The path ahead remained uncertain, fraught with challenges on both sides. But for the first time since the shipwreck that had changed her life, she allowed herself to truly believe in the possibility of a future where love might bridge the chasm between enemy peoples. 2 days later, with Ravholm's Thing assembly having approved the proposed terms, a formal signing ceremony took place on the shore where Saxon and Norse representatives had first met. Ethild signed on behalf of King Vorsson, while Hakon, Eirik, and Thorvald added their marks for Ravholm. As witnesses observed from both communities, Thora stepped forward to add her own signature, not as captive or even pledge, but as architect of the unprecedented agreement. In that moment, standing between the people who had raised her and those who had changed her, she felt the weight of history and the lightness of possibility in equal measure. The ceremony concluded with an exchange of gifts, Saxon silver for Norse amber, Christian manuscripts for pagan craftsmanship. Symbolic gestures of a new relationship yet to be fully tested. As Ethild prepared to depart, he embraced his niece one final time. Your mother would be proud, he whispered in her ear. She always believed in building bridges rather than walls. Tears pricked at Thora's eyes. Tell father I am well. Tell him I have not forgotten who I am or where I come from. I simply expanded those boundaries. Ethild nodded, then turned to Hakon who stood nearby. Take care of her, he said, the simple words carrying layers of meaning. She is more precious than all the silver in Northumbria. I know, Hakon replied, equally simply. Her value cannot be measured in any treasure. As the Saxon ship departed, its sails billowing in the autumn wind, Ravholm's people slowly dispersed, some jubilant at the prospect of new trading opportunities, others still wary of the unprecedented peace, a few openly disapproving of the entire arrangement. Eirik, notably, watched the departing vessel with unreadable eyes before turning to his brother. I will honor the Thing's decision and this agreement, he said stiffly. But know that I remain unconvinced. One treaty does not erase generations of bloodshed. No, Hakon agreed. But it can prevent generations more. With a curt nod, Eirik strode away, gathering his closest warriors for what would undoubtedly be a long night of drinking and debate in the warriors' hall. Left alone on the shore, Hakon turned to Thora, taking both her hands in his. It is done, he said, wonder in his voice. What began with a shipwreck may end with lasting peace. Not end, she corrected, smiling up at him. Begin. This is only the first step on a much longer journey. He studied her face in the fading light, his expression softening. When I pulled you from the sea that day, I thought the gods had delivered a valuable thrall. I could not have imagined they had actually delivered my future. The sea gives strange gifts, she replied, echoing words spoken during her early days in Ravholm. But this may be the strangest, that enemies could become allies. That captive and captor could become. She hesitated. Lovers, he finished for her. Partners. Perhaps, one day, husband and wife, if you would have me. The offer, for that was what it was, stole her breath. Despite everything that had passed between them, despite the treaty and her decision to remain, they had not spoken explicitly of marriage. Such a union would bind not just their hearts but their peoples in ways that would reshape both their worlds. Is that possible? She whispered. A Christian princess and a Norse jarl. 3 years ago, I would have said no. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. Now? I believe we make our own possibilities, princess. We write our own sagas. As the sun set over Ravholm's fjord, painting the water in hues of gold and crimson, Thora rose on her toes and sealed her answer with a kiss, a promise of futures yet to be written, of bridges yet to be built, of love transcending the ancient hatreds of their peoples. The shipwrecked princess and the Viking raider who had rescued her without knowing her true identity had found something neither had sought but both now treasured beyond measure, a love powerful enough to forge peace from conflict, understanding from ignorance, and hope from despair. And in that moment, as gulls wheeled overhead and waves lapped gently at the shore, both knew with bone-deep certainty that some journeys begin with storms only to end in unexpected harbors, safe, welcoming, and more precious for the tempests weathered along the way.